Hello, FBC Salinas. This is Pastor John coming to you with another edition of the Midweek Refresher video, where I desire to do two things. The first thing is to provide you some information. The second thing is to provide you some inspiration in the middle of your week. Certainly hope your week is going well, and if not, may this video serve as a reminder that our God is with us, that He does not fail us, and that He will carry us through whatever is going on in our lives at this particular time. So let's get to the information portion. The reason why I'm in the garden room today is because this Sunday at 8:30, we are having our first spiritual formation class in person. It will also be done via Zoom, so we're doing a hybrid thing, but it's going to happen in this room. We've been talking about developing a biblical worldview. I invite you to be a part of this. It's a great discussion. It's a great class, great information, great teachers who are leading this. And so it's this Sunday, 8:30 a.m. in the garden room. And if you still want to do it via Zoom, feel free. All that information will go out on email and text. And so you have that there. But I really want you to know that those of you that don't like the Zoom thing, you can come on campus now at 8:30 in the morning this upcoming Sunday. All right, so that's really the main announcement that I have for you. The second, as we move into the second part of the midweek refresher, is many of you know this, is that the book of Hebrews is my favorite book in the Bible. I love the imagery. I love I love the exaltation of Jesus Christ throughout the book. And the other thing I love is Hebrews chapter 11. This chapter is known as the Hall of Fame, or the Hall of Faith, if you want to call it that. All these different individuals who walk by faith. And I sometimes find myself reading chapter 11 to remind myself of how powerful God is when we take steps of faith. And in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 22 says this: "By faith Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions concerning the burial of his bones." One verse. Yet if you were to go all the way back to the book of Genesis, starting at chapter 37, you find this out, that Joseph is the main character from chapter 37 pretty much all the way to chapter 50. There's a little thing in there about Jacob, but Joseph is the primary character for all those chapters. In those chapters, we hear about the dream that he has, and he shares that with his brothers. And there's even a musical, Joseph and His Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Pretty big deal, very big deal. We then find out that his brothers sell him into slavery. That's a big deal. We find out while he's in slavery, he gets purchased by a guy by the name of Potiphar. Potiphar sees some promise in Joseph, and as Joseph continues doing what he's doing, all these amazing things start happening, and Potiphar's going, wait, there's something going on here. And Potiphar continues to realize that Joseph is a special individual, gives him more responsibility, and every single time things get better and better and better. And then Potiphar's wife comes on the scene and tries to seduce Joseph, and what does Joseph do? He resists. But yet Potiphar thinks that Joseph did something wrong, throws him in prison. So while in prison, Joseph continues to conduct himself in a godly way. Meets the cupbearer and the baker, tells them what's going to happen to them. And in the process of what happens to them, it holds true. And he says, don't forget to tell Pharaoh about what I did for you. Well, they don't tell him this. Pharaoh then has dreams. All of a sudden, I can't remember if it's the cupbearer or the baker, the one that doesn't get killed. He then says, oh, I remember this guy back in prison. Why don't you talk to him? So Pharaoh brings in Joseph. Joseph interprets the dream. What happens then? Joseph continues to grow in power, continues to be a godly individual, and gives great wisdom. There's a famine because of Joseph understanding what's about to happen, that Egypt was ready for it. All these people come from all over the place to be taken care of. Why? Because Joseph paid attention to God's leadership all throughout this. Joseph then gets reconnected with his brothers. I'm not going to get into all those details. And then he sees his dad again, breaks down and weeps. And then his father passes away. And then in chapter 50, we find out that Joseph dies. 37 to 50. Why am I making a big deal out of this? It's because there were significant things that happened in Joseph's life over and over and over again. And yet, in Hebrews chapter 11, he gets one verse. That's it. One verse. Yet, in this one verse, we're reminded of who? Joseph. Joseph lived his entire life for God, and he only gets one verse out of the deal. But I will tell you this, he got a verse. We may very well think that we're having a legacy. We may very well think that we're making an impact, and we work so hard, and we think that we're going to be talked about and talked about and talked about. Here's Joseph, one of the key players in the Old Testament, gets one verse. But it's a verse about legacy. It's a verse about a legacy of faith. Folks, the reason why we live by faith isn't so that we can be talked about all the time. The reason why we live by faith is because it's the best way to live our lives. Joseph knew that back then, and if he was doing that to say, wow, people are going to be talking about me, and they're going to do all these types of things, it probably wouldn't have worked the way it did. But Joseph lived by faith, hoping to make an impact in the world, not knowing that thousands of years later, there would be one verse that mentions him in Hebrews chapter 11. But that isn't his motivation. His motivation was to walk by faith and trust. My prayer for all of us is that we will walk by faith, that we'll pay attention to the way God's leading in our lives, that we will continue to represent him in a world that continues to go off the rails. May we have a faith that continues building and building and building. And yes, there are going to be those times when that faith is a mustard seed, but there are going to be other times when that mustard seed takes off and grows big time. So may we be a people of faith. May we continue doing what God's called us to do in these ever-changing times. I love you. I'm praying for you. I'm grateful for you. I hope the rest of your week goes well. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.